worst mistake? I had fun all night with a young club guy until my husband unexpectedly returned. Hey Reddit, I'm Haley, and I've got a story to share that I never thought I'd tell anyone. I honestly never thought I'd be here posting, but I guess life can be surprising. I've made a terrible mistake, one that has turned my world upside down and shattered everything I thought I knew about myself and my marriage. My husband, Chris, has made it clear that there's no way he'll ever forgive me, and I genuinely don't know what to do. I'm hoping to get some helpful advice from the Reddit community. My name is Haley, and I'm 32 years old. Chris, my husband, is 30. We have a 5-year-old son. We met at my cousin's birthday party way back in college, and we instantly clicked. After exchanging numbers, we went on a date, and the rest is history. I've always loved Chris, and our relationship has been great. He's the kind of person who sacrifices for others, believing in helping and doing what's right. At first, he took care of the bills while I stayed home with our son. It was an arrangement we agreed on before marriage. Chris has a demanding job, and he often works late nights for weeks on end. As time passed, Chris's demanding job really started to get to me, and it took a toll on us. I found myself spending more and more evenings alone, dealing with our son and the daily grind. While I understood why Chris had to work so hard, it left me feeling incredibly lonely. Our conversations became short and to the point, and I missed those deep talks and moments of laughter we used to share. Those late nights he spent at work were like lonely stretches of time. Our conversations became more about practical stuff and less about us. It felt like we were drifting apart, slowly but surely. It felt like our spark was fading, and I was desperate for some excitement, something to break the monotony. It was like I was searching for a missing piece, trying to find a way to feel alive again amidst the routine. The loneliness started to eat at me. I wanted someone to talk to, someone who understood. I'd scroll through social media, seeing others' seemingly perfect lives, and wonder where our spark had gone. Trying to fill that emptiness just made it worse. I began to question if this was all life had in store for us. Was this quiet, empty feeling the price of stability? I felt torn between wanting to talk to Chris and feeling guilty about it. I knew he took on this demanding job for us, to give us a better life. In his previous job, things were okay, and he had more time for us. But after our son was born, expenses piled up for us. Plus, I wanted a better place to live, a house I felt we could truly call home. Chris knew how much moving meant to me. He worked tirelessly, sacrificing his time and energy to secure this new job with better pay. It was a dream come true in many ways. We could afford a house and provide more for our family, but that also meant he was busier than ever. His dedication to our son, however, was amazing. It was something I admired. Chris adored our little one, and he cherished every moment with him. But I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy at times because I realized I wasn't getting that same level of attention. He would cancel plans to be with our son, but not for me. I wanted to talk to him about this, about how I felt sidelined in our marriage. But every time I thought about it, guilt washed over me. Chris had worked so hard for us, and here I was, wanting more. I realized I needed something to keep me occupied, even if just a little. Our son was growing up, already in kindergarten, so there wasn't as much need for me to be at home all the time. That's when I brought up the idea of getting a job to Chris. He was understandably surprised because I had never been keen on working outside before. I always enjoyed being a stay-at-home mom, aside from the loneliness that crept in. When Chris asked why I wanted to work, I didn't tell him the whole truth. I couldn't bring myself to say that it was because I felt isolated and lonely at home. Instead, I mentioned feeling a bit bored and thought it would be a good change. He was supportive, as always. Chris reassured me that I didn't need to work, and he wouldn't expect me to contribute to the bills. He insisted that he would continue covering all the expenses. He even suggested that I could use my paycheck for myself, to buy things I wanted or treat myself. His words made me genuinely happy. It meant I could keep the money I earned, a little independence in the financial aspect. It was very comforting to know that I could have a bit of financial freedom while still being taken care of by Chris. Getting a job didn't take me long. The pay wasn't extravagant, but it was decent, and the hours were manageable. What really sold me was the flexibility it offered. After a successful interview, I was given a start date, and that's how my journey in the workforce began. The first few weeks were a bit exciting, but way more exhausting. It was a new experience for me, and I'll admit I wasn't particularly fond of it at first. However, it kept me busy and distracted from my feelings of loneliness. Despite the challenges, the job's flexibility allowed me to balance my time between work, spending quality moments with my son, and managing household chores. Adjusting to this new routine wasn't easy, but I was determined to make it work. I met Tina at work, and from the start she was incredibly friendly and welcoming. She quickly became a significant part of my life. We hit it off immediately, and we quickly bonded over our shared experiences and interests. She had this friendly and outgoing personality that drew people in, and I was no exception. In a workplace where I was still finding my footing, her warmth and helpfulness were like a lifeline. I was very grateful for her companionship, especially since I didn't have many friends. Loneliness had been a constant companion, and Tina's warmth felt like a ray of sunshine in my life. At first, I didn't notice anything off about Tina. Sure, there were moments when I sensed something wasn't quite right, but her kindness overshadowed any doubts I had. Besides, I was so starved for genuine connections that I welcomed her into my circle without hesitation. I had always struggled to make friends, even back in school. It felt like I was always on the outside. I never quite fit in with the crowds, and that loneliness followed me into adulthood. Loneliness had been a constant companion for me, even before Tina entered the picture. Growing up, I struggled to connect with others, both at school and within my own family. I wasn't particularly close to my relatives, and while they cared for me, we never had that deep bond that some families seem to effortlessly possess. As for friendships, like I've said before, they were always elusive. I never seemed to fit into any group, always feeling like an outsider looking in. This lack of connection left a void in my life, one that I tried to fill with activities and distractions but never quite succeeded. When I met Chris, everything changed. He wasn't just my husband, he was my best friend. We shared our hopes, dreams, and fears with each other, creating a strong bond built on trust and understanding. He was the one person I could rely on, the one constant in a world that often felt uncertain. But even with Chris by my side, there were moments of loneliness that crept in. His demanding job kept him away for long hours, and that meant I had to go through those quiet hours alone. It was during those times that I felt extra lonely, especially if our son wasn't home. I always felt that I wouldn't have been this lonely if I had some friends. So when Tina reached out and showed genuine interest in being my friend, I was excited and welcomed her with open arms. It had been a long time since someone had taken an interest in me, and I was eager to embrace this newfound companionship. Back then, I didn't know then that our friendship would lead me down a path of mistakes and regrets. Tina quickly became my go-to buddy. She was outgoing, fun, and seemed to know how to have a blast. We hit it off right away, sharing stories and bonding over life's ups and downs. Honestly, I probably trusted Tina a bit too fast. She spilled her guts about everything, and I did the same about feeling lonely and kind of empty despite my job keeping me busy. That's when she started suggesting we hit the town and have some fun. She figured if I was out and about, I wouldn't dwell on Chris being away so much. I gotta admit, her words got me thinking. I've never been big on partying or going out a ton, preferring cozy nights in. But Tina made it sound like the cure for loneliness was a bustling social life. So against my usual instincts, I decided to give it a shot, not realizing the roller coaster I was about to board. Hanging out with Tina definitely changed things for me. She had this way of pushing boundaries and making me feel like I was missing out on life's wild side. At first, it was little things like encouraging me to have one more drink or dance a bit more freely at clubs. But then it escalated. Tina had this persuasive charm about her, and before I knew it, she was planting ideas in my head that I never thought I'd entertain. She started by suggesting that being intimate with others at clubs wasn't really cheating because it was just harmless fun. It sounded enticing at the time, especially with the buzz of the nightlife around us, clouding my judgment more than usual. I guess I wanted to believe her because it felt like a temporary escape from the loneliness that was eating away at me. But looking back now, I see how twisted her influence was, and how it led me down a path I never should have taken. And even though I was a little touchy-feely with people in the club, I never went all the way to sleeping with them. It usually ended with making out. That night was the first time I actually went out with someone. That night was the one that changed everything. My husband was at work as usual, and our son was away at a sleepover for his cousin's birthday. It was just me in the house, and Tina, ever the instigator, suggested we hit the club. I was hesitant at first, I wasn't really feeling it, but Tina's a very persuasive person, and before I knew it, we were at the club, drowning our thoughts in drinks. Here's where it all went downhill. You know how alcohol can mess with your head, right? Well, it did a number on mine. It clouded my judgment and made me do things I'd never imagined myself doing. I noticed a guy who caught my eye. He was good-looking and looked younger, maybe in his early 20s. I liked him, but I didn't make any moves because deep down, I knew it was wrong. Tina, however, kept whispering in my ear that it was just a harmless fling, that it didn't count as cheating because it was in the club, and that I could blame it all on being drunk. I should have ignored her, but I didn't. I made a mistake that I deeply regret. I walked up to the guy. I was very nervous. The music was blasting, so we had to lean in close just to hear each other. We talked and flirted for a bit, and I asked if he wanted to come back to my place, and to my surprise, he agreed right away. Looking back, I can't believe I did something so impulsive. I can't even comprehend what I was thinking or what drove me to make such a reckless decision. It was like I was under some sort of spell. After agreeing with the guy, I went back to Tina to let her know. I promised to fill her in on all the details the next day. She supported me, of course. I made sure she was okay to stay longer at the club before leaving with the guy. I left the club with him. He came with his car, so he had to drive and follow me. We headed to our house, and I ignored the nagging voice in my head telling me it was a terrible idea. We immediately started having sex. Any regret I had was gone to the wind. We had sex for hours all night. It was probably the alcohol that made us go on for that long. After that, we were so tired we just crawled into bed and kind of fell asleep. I wasn't really worried about anyone barging into the house as my husband wasn't supposed to come until the afternoon or maybe late evenings. I generally don't know which, but I knew that he was not coming in the morning. As for my son, the sleepover was only the first phase of the birthday party, and the next day was the actual party. So I knew that he would not be back until the party had ended. After we were done having sex, we kind of just flopped on the bed and fell asleep shortly after that. However, I don't think we had slept for more than an hour or two when I heard the front door slam shut. When that door slammed shut, my heart skipped a beat, and panic set in like a tidal wave. I shook the guy awake, whispering urgently that he needed to leave right away. He scrambled to gather his things and dress, while I strained to hear my husband's footsteps to gauge where he was. I was surprised he didn't even call out for me, but I guess he must have assumed I was still sleeping. I practically begged the guy to hide until my husband left the house, but he surprised me by flatly refusing. He muttered something about not knowing I was married and how he wouldn't have gotten involved if he had known. It was a lame excuse considering the family photos scattered all over our home, but I hadn't mentioned my marital status in the heat of the moment. To him, I was just a one-night stand, nothing more. I couldn't risk my husband walking in on me naked. I hurriedly threw on some clothes and the guy made his way downstairs. Just then, fate decided to play its hand, and my husband and the guy crossed paths on the stairs, the guy going downstairs and my husband coming up. There was a tense moment where apologies were hastily exchanged, the guy explaining he had no clue I was married, and my husband visibly shocked and upset. In the end, the guy left in a hurry. He sounded so awkward and regretful. I stepped out to face my husband. I'd started crying at this point. I knew there was no easy way out of this mess. I'd been caught red-handed. I began with the classic "I was drunk" defense, hoping against hope that it would somehow soften the blow. But Chris wasn't having any of it. He was disappointed and was still in disbelief. He told me in no uncertain terms that alcohol was no excuse for betrayal. His words cut through me like a knife. He reminded me that we had been together for years, and he knew me well enough to know that I wasn't the type to lose control when drinking. My attempt to blame it on being drunk fell flat in the face of his logic. Desperate to shift the blame, I mentioned Tina and I lied that she had forced and dared me to do it. But Chris wasn't buying that either. He called it out as a feeble attempt to deflect responsibility. He told me that I was a grown woman capable of making my own decisions. He said that I wasn't some 5-year-old and that I was definitely not brainless. He pointed out that I should have known better, that I should have thought before acting on someone else's dare, and that trying to shift the blame was even worse. He made it clear that forgiveness was off the table, that this breach of trust was unforgivable. The final blow came when he declared that our marriage was over. That was when I realized that there was no turning back. I begged and pleaded, but he was adamant. He wanted me out of the house before our son returned. He didn't want him to meet us arguing, and he said he would find something to tell him. I bawled my eyes out, begging and pleading like my life depended on it. But he was stone cold. He told me bluntly that it was over. He wasn't going to leave the house he had struggled to buy, so I had to be the one to go. He said my constant begging was only making things worse, and that he needed time away from me to think. He said that no amount of pleading or trying to reason with him would make a dent in his decision. After a few minutes of back and forth, I finally gave in and agreed to leave. I initially wanted to grab just the essentials, but he insisted I take everything. He made it clear that he had worked damn hard to provide for us, and my betrayal had wrecked everything we had built. I tried to make deals, promising to quit my job, be a full-time mom again, always share my whereabouts, cook every night, and even give up my phone and do whatever else it took to rebuild trust. But it was like talking to a brick wall. He was done with my excuses and apologies. With a heavy heart and a load of tears, I packed my stuff and walked out. It hit me hard that my actions had torn apart our marriage and the life we built together, and no amount of begging or deals could fix it. It was a tough pill to swallow, leaving our home knowing I'd wrecked everything. I found myself in a real mess, scrambling for a place to crash. First, I called up Tina, thinking she'd have my back. But boy, was I wrong. She not only turned me down, but also made me feel like it was all my fault. It hurt me a lot that someone I thought was a friend could ditch me like that, and then blame me for everything and wash her hands of any responsibility. Next, I tried my family, hoping for some warmth, but they all had excuses. No space here, too crowded there. It was like hitting a brick wall at every turn. Feeling abandoned by them stung. I know we haven't always been on good terms, but they were my own flesh and blood. I thought about my in-laws, but quickly scrapped and dropped that idea. They'd dig into why I needed shelter, and my whole mess would spill out, leading to another eviction. So there I was, checking into a motel. I had nowhere to go. I felt like reaching out to my old friends was awkward after being out of touch for ages. For the rest of that day, I poured my heart into calls and texts to my husband, begging for a response, but silence was all I got in return. Reddit, I'm at my wit's end here. Any advice or support would mean the world to me right now. Update. Hey Reddit, I knew I'd face some backlash posting this, but the amount of negativity has been overwhelming. I understand I messed up and deserve criticism, but I'm here seeking advice, not insults. Many are saying my husband may never forgive me, and while that's a possibility, I'm holding on to hope. We've built years together, and it feels crazy to consider throwing it away over one drunken mistake. Regarding Tina, yes, I've cut off contact well in a way, I guess. We work together, so it's been awkward at work, with me avoiding her and our co-workers noticing the change. I'm not entertaining questions about it. Please stop suggesting I stay with other friends or at a homeless shelter. It's not as simple as it sounds, and I'm still figuring out my housing situation at the motel for now. I feel like reconnecting with old friends just for a place to stay would have been uncomfortable. Plus, I didn't want to burden them knowing they likely wouldn't agree. And staying at a homeless shelter wasn't an option I considered. Right now, I'm still at the motel, trying to figure out my next steps in terms of housing. So on to the actual update. Not much has changed since last time. My husband and I are talking, but it's pretty limited. We've only had a couple of conversations, mostly about our son and when I can see him. Now, on to my family drama. They reached out, and let's just say they didn't hold back. They put all the blame on me, no surprise there. They said they'd take me in if they could, but they made it clear they thought I messed up big time. And as for my in-laws, they weren't any nicer. They basically said I deserved what I got and hinted they're on board with my husband's divorce plans. So yeah, it's been a real mess with everyone pointing fingers and no one really offering any real help or understanding. Update. Hey Reddit, so it's been a while since I last updated. A lot has happened, and honestly, it's been quite overwhelming. First things first, I got served. Yep, divorce papers. It's official now. It's been weeks since everything unraveled, and I've been trying to keep myself occupied with work. Unfortunately, I still haven't managed to get that transfer I was hoping for, but I'm hanging in there. As for Tina, well, it seems like she's finally understood the gravity of the situation. She's keeping her distance now, which honestly I appreciate. It's better this way. I still see my son whenever I can, but it's not the same as before. On the family front, there hasn't been much communication after that initial confrontation. It's like they've washed their hands of the whole situation and have left me to deal with the aftermath on my own. I've had some time to reflect on everything, and I've come to accept that this chapter of my life has reached its end. Forgiveness seems like a distant dream now, and that's something I've had to make peace with. It's not easy, but I'm taking it one day at a time. Update. Hey Reddit, it's been quite some time since I last checked in here, and honestly, I never thought I'd be updating this thread again. After the overwhelming negativity I faced, I sort of retreated and tried to focus on picking up the pieces of my life. But I feel like I owe you all one final update, so here it goes. The divorce has been finalized. It was a relatively standard procedure as far as divorces go. We didn't have much to divide between us. The cars were in his name, and he was the one handling the payments all along. Similarly, the house was also in his name. That was a decision his parents pushed for back then. So I guess that worked out well for him. I started questioning if my ex-husband truly loved me because he never put anything in my name, not even the cars. I did receive some alimony, probably because I had been a stay-at-home mom for a significant period. The amount was decent and helped me get by for a few weeks, which I'm grateful for. In terms of custody, my ex-husband got custody of our son. He was ecstatic about it, and I could see how much it meant to him. It was tough for me, and I shed a few tears over it, but I know that my son has always had a strong bond with his father. This marks the end of a chapter for me. I'm sad about how things turned out, but I'm also ready to move forward. As for Reddit, I've grown to dislike this platform due to the overwhelming negativity I faced. I might even delete this account eventually. However, I wanted to express my gratitude for the solid advice I did receive amidst all the negativity. Thank you, Reddit.